The pain you feel right now, it's not punishment. It's potential knocking. But most people hear the knock and run the other way. They say, why is this so hard? They say, I just wish it were easier. But here's the truth. The goal was never for life to be easy. The goal was to become stronger. Wishing for easy is the anthem of the uncommitted. It is the lullaby of the lost, because life will never hand you peace. Life hands you pressure, and it's your response to that pressure that defines you. You don't build power in comfort. You build it in the forge. You build it in the struggle. You build it when everything in you wants to quit, and you keep going anyway. So, stop wishing for things to get lighter. Start lifting heavier. Stop praying for the rain to stop. Learn to dance in it. Stop begging for the road to smooth out. Grow boots tough enough to march it anyway. Because the truth is simple. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just becoming. And becoming hurts. Becoming requires fire. Not to destroy you, to refine you. But you have to want it. Want it more than comfort. More than safety. More than the opinions of those who gave up on their own dreams. You have to want growth more than ease. Because ease is a liar. It promises peace and delivers emptiness. But growth gives you something nothing else can, becoming unstoppable. It begins in the mind. Everything you are, everything you're not, everything you could be, it all begins in the silent war happening inside your head. Do you tell yourself, I can't do this? Or do you say, I will find a way? Do you shrink when it gets heavy? Or do you rise and say, this is what I was built for? Your mindset is not a luxury. It is your foundation. And if that foundation is cracked by excuses, it will collapse under pressure. But if that foundation is fortified with discipline, with purpose, with vision, then no storm can shake you. Every time you choose growth over ease, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. Every time you say no to distraction, no to delay, no to the voice inside that whispers, take the shortcut, you carve character into your soul. And that character, that relentless, unbreakable character, becomes the armor you wear through life. You see, discipline is not deprivation. It is devotion. Devotion to your future self. Devotion to the version of you that's waiting on the other side of hard things. Because there is no victory without sacrifice. No glory without grind. No transformation without tenacity. And tenacity doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up early. It stays late. It does the work even when no one's watching. Most people don't lose to failure. They lose to fatigue, to boredom, to the seductive comfort of good enough. But you are not most people. You are the few, the rare, the relentless, the one who doesn't fold when it gets dark, but sharpens your vision to see through it. Because vision is not something you stumble into. It's something you build. You build it when you stop living by what you feel and start living by what you know. And what you know is this: the most powerful force on earth is not talent, not money, not luck. It's a human being who refuses to quit. So don't ask for it to be easy. Ask to be exceptional. Not someday, not when you feel like it, but today, right now, in this breath. Build the habits, do the work, repeat the reps, raise your standards, reclaim your time, because every day you wish for ease is a day you lose to average. But every day you choose to grow even 1% is a day you become someone no storm can stop. Because this is not just motivation. This is the sound of your old life dying and your new self awakening. You see, the difference between where you are and where you could be is not a miracle. It's not some cosmic alignment. It's not luck or fate or a perfect set of circumstances. It's discipline. It's focus. It's how many times you're willing to say no to what's easy so you can say yes to what's worth it. You don't need everything to go right. You just need to go forward. Every time you choose the higher road, every time you do what others avoid, you are carving a life that most people will never touch. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. They wanted it easy. But you wanted to be better. And that desire, that rare, sacred desire to become instead of escape, that's where transformation begins. Because there's a war going on inside you between the version of you that seeks comfort and the version of you that seeks conquest. The question is, which voice will you listen to? One says, just rest a little longer. The other says, get up. We've got work to do. One says, take a break, no one's watching. The other says, act like the whole world is depending on this moment. One says, this is too much. The other says, this is just enough to make you stronger. And every time you choose the second voice, every time you push when it hurts, stay when it's boring, rise when you fall, you are not just improving, you are ascending. This isn't about motivation anymore. It's about alignment. You are aligning your thoughts with action, your action with purpose, your purpose with power. And that power is not loud. It doesn't need attention. It doesn't post. It doesn't boast. It builds. It builds in the silence, in the sweat, in the sacrifices nobody sees. You are not becoming great by accident. You are becoming great by decision. And that decision to stop wishing it were easier and start demanding more from yourself. That is the dividing line. That's where everything changes, where life stops happening to you and starts happening through you. So burn the list of excuses. Delete the fantasy of the easy way. Set fire to the version of you that only shows up when it feels good. And rise. Rise like the entire weight of your destiny depends on it. Because it does. You weren't put here to coast. You weren't born to blend in. You weren't created to cope. You were born to conquer, to face the mountain, to walk through the storm, to train your soul in the furnace of adversity, until there is nothing left inside you but steel and fire and the unshakable knowing that you will not be denied. So don't ever again wish for things to come easy. Wish with every breath, with every fiber, with every sunrise, to be better than you were yesterday. Because when you get better, everything gets better. Because here's the part most won't accept. Growth hurts. Evolution is brutal. Becoming the next version of you means killing the current one. Not softly, not gently, with surgical force. You don't stumble into greatness. You sacrifice for it. You bleed for it. You die to comfort 1,000 times for it. And that pain, that tension between where you are and where you could be, that is sacred. It is not something to escape. It is something to enter. Because the man or woman you were born to be is buried under layers of fear, laziness, validation, addiction, and excuses. And the only way to find them is to dig. Dig when you're tired. Dig when you're doubting. Dig when everything in you says stop and your soul whispers, keep going. Because every day you dig, you get closer to the gold. Not the kind you spend, but the kind you become. Let me say this with fire in my lungs. You don't get rich in life by chasing money. You get rich by building value. And value is built when you build yourself. You build value by showing up when no one's clapping, by doing the hard thing when no one's watching, by becoming so consistent, so focused, so intentional that the world has to take notice because your results are louder than any words you could ever say. You want to live on your terms? Then build the kind of character that deserves that freedom. You want to walk in rooms and shift the energy? Then build the kind of presence forged in early mornings, late nights, sacrifices that make no sense to others, and standards that most will call too much. Good. Let them. You're not here to fit in. You're here to rise. You're here to become a force of nature. The kind of person whose habits are stronger than emotion, whose vision is bigger than the obstacles, whose mind is harder than the mountain. Because when you stop wishing for easy and start living like your life is on the line every single day, you become undeniable. Not overnight, but over hundreds of ordinary days stacked with extraordinary effort. So if today is hard, good, let it break you open. Let it burn the excuses. Let it teach you how much more you are capable of. Because with every rep, with every early wake up, with every temptation you reject, you are building something the weak can't even imagine. And one day, they'll ask how you did it. And you'll smile, because they'll never understand. You didn't pray for ease. You prayed for strength. And then you built it with your bare hands. You became the answer. You became the proof. You became the fire. Understand this. You don't get remembered for what you avoided. You get remembered for what you endured, for what you overcame, for what you became in the middle of the pressure, when every voice said stop and your soul screamed, not yet. Because here's the truth that will outlive us all. The greatest battle you'll ever fight is the one within. It's not the economy. It's not your upbringing. It's not your past. It's the moment you stare into the mirror and decide that who you've been is no longer enough, that the comfort zone has become a cage, and that the only way out is through the fire. You can't cheat the process. You can't shortcut greatness. You can't hack becoming unstoppable. It's earned, one brutal, beautiful, relentless step at a time. So stop asking for signs. You are the sign. Stop waiting for a miracle. You are the miracle if you choose to wake up and walk like it. Because no one is coming to make it easier. No one is coming to do the work for you. But the day you stop wishing for it to be easier and instead start becoming the person who can handle the hard, that's the day the whole game changes. The path doesn't get smoother. You get stronger. The weights don't get lighter. You get more powerful. The challenges don't disappear, but you stop fearing them because you realize every obstacle is an opportunity in disguise. Every delay is a setup for greater depth. Every loss is sharpening your blade. And one day, you'll look back and smile, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. You'll see how every early morning, every tear you didn't post, every moment you chose discipline over distraction, built something sacred, a life of integrity, a spirit of fire, and a mind that doesn't just survive, it commands. So remember this every single day. You don't need life to hand you anything. You just need to wake up and ask more from yourself. More focus, more heart, more consistency, more courage. Because you're not in competition with anyone else. You're in a war with the version of you that settles. And that version loses today. Because you're done wishing. You're done waiting. You're done hoping for a softer world. You're building yourself to handle the one that exists. And that is where freedom begins. That is where power is born. That is when life finally says, now you're ready. So go. Live like your life is a masterpiece in progress. Think like the world is being built through you. Act like every step matters because it does. And rise, not for ease, but for greatness. The world doesn't rise for titles. It rises for thinkers. Not just people with ambition, but people with economic philosophy. People who don't just earn income, they command economies. People who think like leaders, move like creators, and build like architects of destiny. This is not about managing money. This is about commanding it. This is not about saving. This is about structuring a life that produces wealth on autopilot, not by chance, but by design. Because the true economy doesn't start in the stock market. It starts in your mind. If your thoughts are poor, your results will be bankrupt. If your vision is small, your influence will collapse. If your identity is weak, your wealth will leak. An economic leader doesn't ask, how do I make money? They ask, how do I become the kind of person who creates value at scale, consistently, with precision? It starts with mindset, but not the watered-down version they put on posters. The mindset of an economic leader is ruthless, deliberate, strategic. They don't waste thought on what doesn't matter. They don't drown in opinion. They live in principle. They think in systems, not emotions. In assets, not hours. In impact, not applause. They don't chase shiny. They build solid because they know economic power is not about what you earn. It's about what you own, what you control, what grows while you sleep. So the first shift is this. You must stop thinking like a worker and start thinking like a wealth architect. A worker asks, what do I get paid to do? A leader asks, how can I multiply value through systems that scale? That means you stop trading time. You start building assets. Your knowledge becomes a product. Your skills become leverage. Your wisdom becomes a machine. Because an economic leader doesn't just work for money. They make money work for them. They understand that every dollar is a soldier, and every soldier must be assigned a mission, not just to pay bills, to build freedom. That means clarity, clarity of mission, clarity of target, clarity of leverage. If you don't know what your wealth is for, you'll waste it chasing the approval of people who don't even respect themselves. So you need vision, not for luxury, for liberation. Economic leadership is about owning your life so deeply that no politician, no economy, no client, no company can shake your foundation. It's about building from within, creating value on demand, thinking 5 moves ahead while others are still reacting to the last one. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's silent dominance. The discipline to delay gratification. The wisdom to reinvest. The humility to learn. The obsession to build. You want to rise? Then study how the wealthy think. Not what they wear. Not what they drive. What they believe. They believe in compound growth. They believe in scaling value. They believe in partnerships, not dependencies. They believe in being so good at solving problems that the world has no choice but to send money in return. And more than anything, they believe in this. I am the economy. I am the brand. I am the value. I am the source, not the seeker. And when you get that deep enough in your soul, wealth stops being a chase. It becomes your shadow. Then let's go deeper into the layers of thought most people never touch, because this is where money stops being a goal and becomes a reflection of the mind that created it, a mirror of the discipline behind it, a consequence of the person you've become. The economic leader doesn't get rich by mistake. They engineer their prosperity. They don't stumble into success. They strategize their expansion. And at the core of that strategy is one thing: vision, not vague dreams, not I want to be successful, but crystal-cut vision so detailed, it feels like memory. They see it. They feel it. They build from it. Every decision filtered through one question. Does this align with where I'm going? And if it doesn't, it's gone. No matter how easy, tempting, or profitable it looks, because the economic leader is not seduced by short-term dopamine. They're driven by long-term dominion. They understand the power of focus, the strength of staying in their lane, because they know every yes costs something. Every distraction is a debt. And clarity is compound leverage. So they protect it fiercely. And from that clarity, they move into discipline. Because clarity without consistency is a fantasy. And the economic leader doesn't live in fantasy. They live in formulas. They don't just grind. They build systems of discipline, daily non-negotiables, rituals of focus, boundaries of protection. They don't rise based on mood. They rise based on mission, because they know how you do the small things is how you do everything. The way you structure your day, that's how you build your empire. You show me someone's morning, and I'll show you their financial future. Discipline is not suffering. It's sovereignty. It's saying no now, so you never have to say please later. And from discipline comes the most powerful force of all, ownership. An economic leader owns everything, every result, every loss, every delay, every win. No blaming, no waiting, no outsourcing responsibility. Because when you own it all, you can change it all. They stop saying the market is tough. They start saying, how can I adapt faster? They stop saying, no one's helping me. They start saying, how can I become so valuable they can't ignore me? That mindset, that relentless internal accountability is what transforms average income into generational wealth. It's not about looking rich. It's about building a life that funds freedom. And freedom isn't just financial. It's mental. Freedom to think without fear, to move without begging, to choose what to create, where to go, and who you get to become. That is what economic leadership is really about. Not the money. The mastery then lets ascend to the summit where true wealth breathes. Because this is the level most never reach. Not because they can't, but because they're not willing to think this deep, this clear, this responsibly. The final layer of an economic leader's mind is leverage. Not just financial leverage, life leverage. Because they understand wealth isn't built by doing more. It's built by multiplying your impact, doing the right things, through the right systems, with the right people at scale. They know how to step back and ask, what am I doing that someone else could do? What system could do this instead of me? How can I use technology, people, and capital to expand what only I can create? You see, the average person spends their whole life trying to be busy. The economic leader, they try to become replaceable. Because only when you remove your time from the equation can you start building true freedom. They build teams. They automate value. They create frameworks that operate without their constant involvement. Because wealth is not about being the hardest worker in the room. It's about building a machine that runs, even when you sleep. They stop asking, how much does it cost? They start asking, what is the return on this decision in the next 10 years? And they build with that scale in mind. Not fast, but forever. And this brings us to the heart of it all. Value. You want to build real wealth? Then stop chasing money. Start becoming the kind of person the world rewards. A problem solver. A gap closer. A value creator. Because money follows value. Always. No exception. No shortcut. And value doesn't mean talent. It means relevance. It means solving real problems for real people with real solutions. The economic leader isn't loud. They're lethal. Not because they scream louder, but because they serve deeper. And when you stack enough value, enough solutions, enough consistency and character, wealth becomes not something you make. It becomes something you attract. Not by accident, but by alignment. And now we reach the final note. The one truth that pulses behind every powerful thinker, every wealthy soul, every economic leader. You are the asset. You are the brand. You are the machine. You are the generator of opportunity, of cash flow, of change. And your greatest return will never come from what you invest in the market. It will come from what you invest in yourself. So, study more, think sharper, move cleaner, decide quicker, protect your time like a hawk, protect your energy like a vault, and lead your life like a living enterprise. Because when you think like a leader, the world responds like you're one. You are not chasing wealth. You are becoming it. So rise, move like you were born to build empires. Speak like your voice funds futures. Think like every idea is a seed for a generation you'll never meet. Because this is not just about income. It's about influence. It's about immortality through impact. You're not just here to survive. You're here to lead the economy of your life. And in doing so, you unlock a legacy no market could ever measure. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to flex your muscles. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Because when your mind is strong, truly strong, the room feels it before you even speak. A strong mind doesn't chase attention. It commands respect, not through arrogance, but through undeniable presence. You see, most people build bodies. Some build brands. But very few ever build the one thing that changes everything. A mind so solid, so unshakable, so brutally clear, it terrifies mediocrity. Why? Because a strong mind doesn't need agreement. It doesn't crumble under pressure. It doesn't panic when the plan falls apart. It adapts. It recalibrates. It rises. You want to become unstoppable? Then forget impressing others. Forget fitting in. Forget being liked. Build a mind that doesn't flinch. Build a mind that says, this storm, let it come. Build a mind that scares people, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. Because your silence is louder than their shouting. Because your calm exposes their chaos. Because your presence makes them realize they haven't done the work. And that kind of power, it isn't born. It's forged. Then let's build it. Because a strong mind isn't something you're born with, it's something you train. And the first step, embrace discomfort like it's your mentor. Most people run from discomfort. They label it as pain. They escape into distraction, into comfort, into anything that numbs the sting. But a strong mind, it runs toward it. Not because it enjoys suffering, but because it understands that discomfort is data. It's proof that you're stretching. It's evidence that you're outgrowing your limits. It's the raw material of transformation. A weak mind says, this is too hard. A strong mind says, this is how I grow. Every challenge becomes training. Every setback becomes feedback. Every no becomes fuel. And when you stop avoiding discomfort, you stop avoiding power. Step 2, ruthlessly control your input. You can't build a strong mind with junk thoughts, just like you can't build a strong body with junk food. If your mind is constantly flooded with gossip, fear, noise, and comparison, how can you expect it to think clearly, create powerfully, or act decisively? A strong mind is a guarded gate. It doesn't let everything in. It filters. It chooses. It protects its peace like a fortress. Because once your attention is hijacked, your clarity is gone. And without clarity, you can't lead. You can't build. You can't stand. Want mental strength? Then master what you watch. Master what you listen to. Master who you allow to speak into your world. You don't have to cut everyone off, but you do have to guard your influence because your mind becomes what it consumes. Step 3, train your focus like it's your life force, because it is. Distraction is the enemy of power, not because it's loud, but because it's subtle. It doesn't destroy you with force, it erodes you with fragments. One notification at a time, one scroll at a time, one excuse, one delay, one mental tab left open for too long. And before you know it, your mind is no longer yours. But a strong mind, it's not just focused. It's ruthlessly focused. Because here's the truth. Where your focus goes, your life follows. Where your attention flows, your identity forms. And if you don't train your focus, the world will train it for you. You want to scare mediocrity? Then lock in. Set blocks of time where you're unreachable. Cut off digital noise. Silence the world so you can hear yourself think, so you can build the internal stamina to stay locked into a task long after the world would have quit. Because this world doesn't need more people with ideas. It needs people with the concentration to execute them. Focus isn't something you have. It's something you practice. And the more you practice, the less space you give to doubt, to drama, to distraction. And when that becomes who you are, people feel it. They don't understand it, but they respect it. They can't manipulate you. They can't shake you. They can't pull you into every crisis because you're anchored. Step 4, make your word law. If you say you're going to do it, do it. Even if no one sees. Even if no one claps. Even if you're the only one holding yourself to that standard. Why? Because a weak mind negotiates with itself. A strong mind, it executes. It doesn't wait to feel like it. It doesn't beg for motivation. It moves because it said it would. Discipline isn't punishment. It's self-respect. And when your word becomes law, you stop chasing confidence. You become it. You embody it. You no longer need to convince anyone of your strength because your consistency speaks louder than your voice ever could. Then, let's finish what we started. Because building a strong mind doesn't end with discipline. It evolves into something deeper, something rare. Step 5, master your emotions or they will master you. Understand this. Your mind cannot be strong if your emotions control your decisions. And emotional strength is not about being cold, stoic, or distant. It's about ownership. It's being able to feel the fear and still move forward. To feel the pressure and stay calm anyway. To feel the weight of the world and not let it bend you out of shape. A weak mind reacts. A strong mind responds. It sees the storm and chooses how to sail through it, not how to scream at the waves. You want real power? Then don't let anger speak for you. Don't let fear drive your choices. Don't let disappointment shut you down. Train your emotional muscle. Pause. Observe. Breathe before you respond. Own your internal world so deeply that no external event can steal your peace. Because when you master your emotions, you become unshakable. You become the eye of the hurricane. You become the stillness in a world addicted to reaction. And that calm terrifies people because it shows them what's possible when someone actually does the inner work. Step 6, choose solitude over noise. Most people can't sit alone in silence. They need constant stimulation, a screen, a voice, a distraction. Because if they're quiet for too long, they'll hear the truth they've been avoiding. But a strong mind seeks solitude. It chooses stillness, not because it's easy, but because it's where clarity lives. Because silence sharpens vision. Because alone is where you meet your real self. You want to scare the world? Be the one who's comfortable with themselves, who doesn't need a crowd to feel validated, who doesn't need attention to feel alive, who can disappear for a season and come back 10 times sharper. That kind of person, that's who changes rooms. That's who shifts cultures. That's who leads. And finally, step 7, think long, act daily. The strongest minds are vision-driven. They don't need instant results to stay committed. They don't need overnight applause. They plant deeply and build slowly because they're not after a quick win. They're building an empire that lasts. They move with urgency but never panic. They move with pace but never desperation because they know where they're going. And nothing can rush a mind that has already decided its outcome. So build that mind, brick by brick, habit by habit, thought by thought. And one day, you won't need to say a word. You'll walk into a room, and your presence alone will say, I am not here to be impressive. I am here because I've built something that cannot be shaken. Not loud, not flashy, just unignorable. That's the kind of mind that scares everyone because it can't be moved. And when you build that, you don't just win. You redefine what power looks like. Leadership is not a title. It's not a corner office or a nameplate or 1,000 followers nodding in agreement. Leadership is a weight, a sacred responsibility, a fire that must be carried not for your own glory, but for the growth of others. And if you do it right, you don't just lead people, you lift them. You don't just give orders, you give identity. Because real leadership is not about being in charge. It's about being charged with a vision that's bigger than you, a purpose that stretches beyond your comfort, and a commitment to truth that does not waver when tested. And here's the truth. Every generation redefines leadership. But the principles, the truths, they do not change. They echo through time. They whisper through the decades. They burn through noise and trends and surface-level hype. Because leadership, at its core, is timeless. It is not dictated by technology. It is not confined to platforms. It is not reshaped by fashion or filtered by popularity. It is a foundation, a way of being, a standard you carry even when the world is too distracted to notice. The greatest leaders, from ancient kings to modern CEOs, from battlefield generals to high school mentors, all carry the same flame. It's the flame of responsibility, the flame of vision, the flame of sacrifice. They all understood one thing. Leadership isn't about having power over people. It's about holding power for people. It's about becoming the kind of person others can trust with their future. And trust, that's the real currency. You don't lead with fear. You don't lead with manipulation. You don't lead with charisma alone. You lead with trust, earned slowly, kept fiercely. And trust is built not in speeches, but in standards, in how you show up when the spotlight is gone, in how you respond when the pressure rises, in how you treat those who can't offer you anything but honesty. If people trust your character, they will follow your vision. So, if you want to lead, truly lead, you must first lead yourself. Because you cannot take people somewhere you haven't gone. You cannot demand discipline in others if you make excuses in private. You cannot call for vision if you're still hiding from clarity. Leadership begins not with authority, but with alignment. You must become the standard you speak about. You must become the proof before you become the plan. Because people don't follow instructions. They follow example. And this is where most fail. They want the influence without the inner work. They want the loyalty without the integrity. They want the spotlight without carrying the torch. But you can't fake depth. You can't shortcut trust. You either embody the values or you violate them. There is no neutral ground. Because every time you speak, your team is watching. Your family is watching. The next generation is watching. And what they need from you is not inspiration without substance. They need consistency without cracks. Your words mean nothing if your habits scream something else. Your mission is just noise if your mindset is still at war with itself. That's why real leadership begins in silence, in the moments before the decisions, in the way you carry your own chaos, in the standards you set when no one is looking. You don't wait to lead when the time is right. You lead when it's hard, when it's unclear, when it's unpopular. That's when your voice becomes a compass, not a microphone. Because leadership is not about being liked. It's about being trusted. And trust often requires saying what no one else will say, doing what no one else wants to do, making the call that others will avoid. You cannot fear being misunderstood because if your values are true, they will outlive the criticism. And if your vision is real, the right people will find their way to it, not because you shouted louder, but because you stood stronger. And when it comes to generations old and new, the true test of leadership is not how much you teach, but how much you're willing to learn. You must be rooted in wisdom, but flexible in expression. You must honor the past without becoming trapped in it. You must welcome the future without forgetting what matters. Every generation sees the world differently, and that's not a threat. It's an opportunity. Because leadership that lasts is leadership that listens. Younger generations don't want perfect leaders. They want honest ones, ones who admit mistakes, ones who ask questions, ones who know the weight of their words. And older generations, they want relevance, but they also want reverence. They want to know their sacrifices meant something, that their scars became bridges, that their lessons are not discarded, but woven into progress. That's your job. To stand between generations, not as a divider, but as a bridge. To take the strength of the past and the potential of the future and forge something timeless. Something rooted in character, not clout. In courage, not convenience. Because the leaders who last, the ones remembered long after their voices fall silent, are not the loudest in the room. They are the deepest. They don't need to dominate. They don't need to shine. They need to serve. And not in a way that begs for recognition, but in a way that builds people, that raises standards, that strengthens culture, that multiplies vision through the hearts of others. Because service isn't weakness. It's the highest form of strength. It says, I am here not to be above you, but to walk with you. And to serve like that, you must be humble enough to admit you don't know everything. You're not always right. You're not the hero in every story. In fact, great leaders don't need to be the hero at all. They raise heroes. They pour courage into others. They don't hoard the light, they reflect it. And in doing so, they create movements, not monuments. But that kind of leadership, it requires radical ownership. No blaming, no hiding. No, that's not my fault. If something breaks under your watch, you own it. If someone falls under your leadership, you learn from it. You don't run from responsibility, you grow inside it. Because leadership isn't about comfort, it's about accountability. You take the hit. You stand in the fire. You look people in the eye and say, this is on me and I'll fix it. And that kind of ownership builds resilience. Because let's be honest, leading people will break your heart. It will test your patience. It will stretch your capacity. You'll be misunderstood, betrayed, ignored. You'll give everything and watch people walk away like it was nothing. And still you stay. Still you build. Still you rise. Because resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about growing stronger while you carry the weight. It's about continuing to believe in the mission, even when no one else claps, even when the room goes quiet, even when your hands shake and your voice is tired. You show up again and again and again, because your presence, your consistency becomes the proof, the evidence that says this matters, the signal that says you're not alone. Because sometimes the most powerful leadership isn't in your speeches. It's in your stability. And if you really want to lead across generations, you must give more than instructions. You must give identity. Help people see who they are. Remind them of what they can become. Pull out the greatness that's hiding beneath insecurity, pain, and doubt. That's not management. That's ministry. That's not systems. That's spirit. That's the difference between a boss and a builder. So build. Speak life into people who are used to silence. Believe in those who've forgotten how to believe in themselves. Lead in such a way that your presence is not about being needed, but about empowering others to no longer need you. That's legacy. That's leadership. And when your leadership becomes a mirror, when people see their own potential more clearly because of how you showed up, then you haven't just led a generation. You've lifted it. Let me tell you something most people never figure out. The world doesn't move on truth alone. It moves on belief. It moves on influence. It moves when someone somewhere says the right words, in the right tone, at the right time, and suddenly doors open, minds shift, resistance melts. And people say the one word that changes everything. Yes. Not because they were forced, not because they were tricked, but because something about that moment, something about you, gave them permission to believe, to trust, to follow, to take a chance. This is the art of persuasion. And let me be clear, this is not manipulation. This is mastery. The mastery of connection, the mastery of energy, the mastery of intent. Because when you truly understand what makes people say yes, you no longer chase opportunities, you create them. You don't hope for influence, you command it. You don't beg for attention, you earn it. With presence, with power, with purpose. And the first secret, the foundation of all persuasion, is certainty. People do not follow need. They do not follow desperation. They do not follow indecision. They follow certainty. The one who moves people is the one who knows who they are, what they believe, and where they're going, and they say it like they mean it. If your voice trembles, the room will doubt. If your conviction is weak, the world will hesitate. But when your soul speaks with alignment, with conviction, with clarity, you don't just communicate, you transmit. Certainty is magnetic. It draws people in, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. And clarity is the rarest language of all. So I'll ask you, no. Were you clear on who you are? Because persuasion doesn't start with other people. It starts with persuading yourself. You must become the first believer in what you say. You must be sold on the value you bring. You must know in your bones that your offer, your message, your vision is worth leaning into. And if you don't believe it, no one else will. This is the internal work that fuels external power. Next comes the rhythm of words. The way you speak matters. Have you ever noticed how some people can speak a single sentence and the room quiets, while others ramble for hours and say nothing of weight? It's not just what they say, it's how they say it. Great persuaders speak with structure. They speak with music. Their words have a pulsy rise and fall, a cadence that feels inevitable. Not rushed, not chaotic intentional, because humans don't just respond to logic, they respond to feeling. They say, I don't know why, but I just feel like I can trust her. I can't explain it, but something about the way he said it, it stuck with me. That's not an accident. That's technique. That's tone. That's the art of landing your words in the nervous system, not just the brain. But none of that works without presence. Presence is persuasion's secret weapon. When you are truly here, when you are fully in the moment, not scattered, not rehearsing, not doubting, but rooted, people feel it. Presence is rare in a distracted world. And anything rare becomes valuable. So the moment you show up fully attuned, alert, listening, grounded, you become powerful. Most people live like ghosts, half present, half distracted, half alive. But when you bring your whole self to a conversation, when your eyes say, I see you, when your energy says, I'm with you, when your words say, I understand you, people lean in, they open, they soften, and the gate to influence swings wide open. And let's talk now about the greatest tool in the persuader's arsenal. Questions. See, amateurs speak to convince. Masters ask to uncover. Because the secret to getting people to say yes is not to tell them what they need, it's to help them realize it themselves. And nothing pulls truth from the soul faster than the right question. Why do you think that hasn't worked for you yet? What would it mean to finally get this handled? If you knew success was guaranteed, what would you do next? These are not random. These are precision tools designed to bypass the surface and hit the core. Because here's the truth. People don't change because of your advice. They change because of their own realizations. So the great persuader is not a preacher, they're a mirror. They hold space for clarity to emerge. They create conditions for truth to rise. They ask, they listen, and they reflect what others have been too afraid or too distracted to see. And then only then do they guide. Because persuasion is a dance, not a dictatorship. It's a rhythm of give and take, speak and pause, offer and wait, push and release. And just like a dance, it requires attunement to mood, to energy, to resistance. You don't bulldoze someone into yes. You invite them into it. You make the path appealing, obvious, irresistible. And the way you do that is through story. Facts tell, stories sell, because stories bypass skepticism. They slip under defenses. They make people feel something. A statistic makes you nod. A story makes you believe. You can say 90% of people fail because they never take action. And someone might agree. But if you say, let me tell you about a man I knew, talented, hungry, filled with potential, but he waited too long. He kept saying, next week, next year, when I'm ready. And when life finally handed him the opportunity, he had no fire left to take it. That hits different. That lands because we are wired for story. We see ourselves in story. And when someone sees themselves in your message, they say yes. Not because of you, but because of them. Because something clicked inside. Something lit up. Something said, this is me, and I need to move. So here's what you must remember. Persuasion is not about pushing. It's about awakening. It's not about conquest. It's about connection. It's not about getting your way. It's about showing someone their way more clearly, more powerfully, more vividly than they've ever seen it before. This is not about trickery. This is about transformation. And you can only lead others there if you've walked it yourself. So become persuasive not by learning tactics, but by becoming magnetic. By being so aligned with your message, so congruent with your energy, so present with your words, so generous with your intent, that people don't just hear you, they trust you. Because the most persuasive person in the room is not the one with the loudest voice. It's the one with the clearest spirit. And when your spirit speaks, the world says yes. There is another truth no one talks about enough. Persuasion, real persuasion, begins before a single word leaves your mouth. It begins with how you see the world, because your view of people determines your approach to people. If you see people as obstacles, you'll try to overpower them. If you see people as wallets, you'll try to sell them. But if you see people as mirrors, reflections of the same hunger, fear, longing, and hope that lives in you, then you don't try to conquer them, you connect. And when people feel that you see them not just as a means to an end, but as human, worthy, important, they listen. Not because you demanded attention, but because you earned resonance. You touched something ancient inside them. You reminded them that beneath the noise, the roles, the masks, we are the same. That's the paradox of persuasion. You become more powerful the moment you stop trying to win people and start trying to understand them. That's when everything shifts, because now you're not speaking at them. You're speaking from within them. And here's where clarity comes in. You cannot persuade if you are not clear. If your mind is foggy, your message will fumble. If your intention is scattered, your influence will fall flat. The world is full of noisome millions of voices shouting at once. So when you speak, you better make it count. You better speak with a blade, not a broom. Cut through, pierce through, hit the heart. That means before you open your mouth, you must ask yourself, what do I really want them to feel? What do I want them to know? What decision do I want them to make, not just in their mind, but in their bones? Clarity sharpens your energy, and people can feel when you're clear, just like they can feel when you're bluffing, when you're vague, when you're uncertain, even if your words are smooth. Don't underestimate the radar people have for realness. You want to be persuasive? Be clear. You want people to say yes? Give them a reason to trust your direction, because clarity leads, and people want to follow someone who knows where they're going. Now let's talk about vision, because persuasion isn't just about solving problems. It's about casting possibilities. The greatest persuaders don't just convince you to leave where you are. They paint a picture of where you could be. They hold a mirror to your potential, not just your pain. They don't say, you're broken, let me fix you. They say, you're powerful, and I'm here to wake it up. That's vision. Vision makes people rise. Vision makes people move. Because people aren't hungry for more products, more noise, more empty promises. They're hungry for meaning, for purpose, for a story worth stepping into. And if you can describe the future better than they can imagine it, they'll follow you straight into it. But here's the catch. You cannot give a vision you haven't seen yourself. You must have tasted it, touched it, believed it. You must speak of the mountaintop because you've climbed eider, because you're climbing it now. If your vision is borrowed, recycled, half believed, no one will follow you. Because we can't lead people into places we're not willing to go. So before you try to get anyone else to say yes, you need to say yes to your own vision. Yes to the work. Yes to the responsibility. Yes to the pressure of carrying purpose in a world that celebrates noise over truth. And when your yes is real, when your yes has roots, others will feel it. Let's bring in the muscle that supports it all. Discipline. Because you can have clarity. You can have belief. You can even have vision. But if you don't have discipline, you will be inconsistent. And inconsistency kills persuasion. One day you're lit with energy. The next day you disappear. One day you're inspiring. The next day you're scrambling. And people notice because consistency builds credibility. Discipline says, you can count on me. I don't show up only when I feel like it. I show up because I said I would. You want to persuade others? Start by keeping the promises you make to yourself. If you say you're going to study, do it. If you say you're going to train, do it. If you say you're going to build, speak, write, lead, do it. Not perfectly, but persistently. Because when you respect your own word, others begin to trust it too. Discipline doesn't make you robotic. Discipline makes you reliable. And in a world filled with broken promises, unreliability, and fake charisma, being real, consistent, and clear is your greatest competitive edge. Let's now talk about what turns words into motion. Action. You can know all the techniques. You can read all the books. You can listen to all the speeches. But none of it matters until you use it. Until you test it. Until you risk hearing no. Because here's the truth. Persuasion is not theory. It's practice. It's sweat. It's rhythm. It's rejection. It's recalibration. And every great persuader you admire today, they weren't born with the ability. They built it through awkward conversations, through feedback, through misfires, through refinement. So stop waiting until you know enough. Stop preparing endlessly. Stop thinking your confidence will come before you act. Confidence doesn't precede action. Confidence is the reward for courage. Say that again. Confidence is the reward for courage. It's the fruit of showing up again and again, even when your voice shakes, even when the room goes cold, even when they don't buy, even when they don't clap, because you're becoming the person who leads anyway. That's real power. That's real persuasion. And when people see that you don't flinch, that you don't back down, when the yes doesn't come immediately, they respect you. Because the world doesn't just need convincing voices. It needs convicted ones. Ones that don't sway in the wind of opinion. Ones that are rooted in principle. Ones that act from alignment, not approval. And when your action matches your message, when your life is your pitch, people say yes before you even open your mouth. Because the world doesn't just need more voices. It needs more anchors. People who don't get blown away by rejection. People who aren't addicted to applause. People who can walk into a room, speak truth with calm fire, and leave even if no one claps, knowing they did what needed to be done. That's rare. That's real. That's irresistible. You want to know what makes people say yes without hesitation? It's alignment. When your words match your energy, when your actions match your message, when your story matches your standards, you become undeniable. You become someone others want to follow, not because you told them to, but because they feel safer in your direction than in their own hesitation. And here's another truth. People don't just say yes to you. They say yes to who they become in your presence. They say yes to the version of themselves you reflect back to them. So If you want to be more persuasive, stop obsessing over your pitch and start elevating your presence. Because presence creates permission. When someone feels seen by you, when someone feels understood by you, when someone feels lifted by the way you hold space for their highest self, they say yes because they want more of that. They want more of themselves, the way you showed them they could be. That's not sales. That's service. That's not closing. That's calling. Because great persuasion isn't about pushing people across the finish line. It's about drawing out the hero that's been waiting to rise. So now we arrive at one of the most overlooked, yet most potent pieces of persuasion. Gratitude. Yes, gratitude. Why? Because gratitude is grounding. Gratitude keeps your influence from turning into arrogance. It keeps your power pure. When you're grateful not just for outcomes, but for the opportunity to speak, to serve, to lead you, stop sounding like a manipulator and start sounding like a missionary. And people can feel that difference. Gratitude brings humility. Humility brings trust. And trust opens doors that strategy alone never could. When you enter a conversation with a heart full of appreciation, not entitlement, you don't try to extract value from others. You add value. You elevate. You uplift. You give without keeping score. And in doing so, people lean closer. They listen longer. And more often than not, they say yes. Not just to your offer, but to your energy. Let's move forward to something that separates the amateurs from the artists. Adaptability. Because you can be the most skilled speaker in the world, but if you can't read the room, you'll lose the room. If you can't sense when to lean in and when to pull back, if you can't pivot when someone's guard goes up, if you deliver a scripted monologue while ignoring the signals right in front of you, you become predictable. And persuasion dies in predictability. The greatest persuaders are not locked into scripts, they're synchronized with the moment. They listen, they feel, they observe, they respond. They adjust their tone, their pace, their volume, their story, not to manipulate, but to meet people where they are. Because if you meet people where they are, you can take them where they've never been. But if you preach from a distance, you'll never move them an inch. So ask yourself, are you trying to be impressive or impactful? Because adaptability is not weakness, it's wisdom. You're not changing your truth. You're changing your delivery so that the truth actually lands. This is where resilience enters. Because, let's be honest, there will be people who don't say yes. There will be doors that don't open. There will be audiences that stare blankly, clients who ghost you, critics who mock you, and even friends who doubt you. And in those moments, your ego will want to shut down, to pull back, to protect itself from rejection. But your mission has to be stronger than your pride. Because if one no can make you question your message, you were never carrying a message. You were carrying a need for approval. But if you can keep speaking truth even when it echoes, if you can keep showing up even when your voice trembles, if you can hold your ground not with aggression but with peaceful certainty, you become unshakable. And that is when people start to trust you. Because they're not just watching what you say, they're watching what you do when it's hard. Resilience is persuasive. Because when others fold and you stay, when others fade and you remain, when others doubt and you still deliver, people can't ignore you anymore. Because you've become something very few ever become. Reliable. Reliable people are rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. In a world where people quit at the first sign of discomfort, in a world where everyone wants to be heard but few want to listen, in a world where people show up only when it's easy, you become persuasive the moment you consistently do what others refuse to. You show up, not for attention, but out of alignment. You speak, not to impress, but to impact. You ask, not to control, but to connect. This is the kind of reliability that moves nations, the kind of reliability that builds movements, the kind of reliability that makes your yes powerful and your no respected. And now let's go to the final piece, learning. See, persuasion is not a final destination. It's not a medal you earn and hang on your chest forever. It's a practice, a process, a path of endless refinement. Because people change, culture changes, language shifts, contexts evolve. So the master persuader never stops learning. You study human behavior not out of manipulation, but out of curiosity. You listen, not just to respond, but to understand. You watch great communicators not to copy their tactics, but to understand their timing, rhythm, energy, because persuasion is as much about timing as it is about technique. It's the dance of knowing when to pause, when to punch, when to whisper, when to rise. And the only way to learn that is to keep showing up, to speak and stumble, to ask and misstep, to risk rejection again and again, not because you enjoy it, but because your mission matters more than your comfort. Learning makes you dangerous because now your message isn't frozen in time, it's alive. It breathes, it adapts, it grows. And people don't want perfection, they want real. They want someone who grows with them, who learns, adjusts, listens, applies, improves. Someone who doesn't pretend to know it all, but shows they're committed to getting better, to serving better, to communicating with excellence. And excellence is magnetic. Not perfection excellence. Excellence says, I take this seriously. I honor your attention. I value your time. So I bring my best every time. That's what changes lives. Not a clever phrase. Not a viral slogan. But a consistent, evolving, deeply human voice yours. A voice that has wrestled with doubt and chosen courage. A voice that has met rejection and chosen resilience. A voice that has failed and learned and stood back up not as a victim, not as a salesman, but as a leader. And so I leave you with this. If you want to be persuasive, become someone worth listening to. Not because you're the loudest, not because you know the most, but because you've earned your voice, because you've lived what you teach, because your presence calms the room, your story lifts the room, and your words move the room. That's persuasion. Not a trick, not a script, but a transformation in you first and through you in others. So speak, stand tall, be clear, be grounded, serve, invite, connect, challenge, and always believe in what you're asking people to believe in. Because if you do that long enough, deep enough, loud enough with your life, you'll never have to push people to say yes. They'll say it willingly because the truth in your voice reminded them of the truth in their own. And that is the highest persuasion of all. Imagine this. You walk into a room and you don't need to speak loudly. No gimmicks, no proving. You simply stand there steady as a mountain. Your eyes don't seek approval, they offer trust. Your voice doesn't scream to be heard, it lands straight into people's hearts. Your presence silences the room. Not because you are intimidating, but because you are so clear, so grounded, so real, you cannot be ignored. And when you speak, people listen, not just with their ears, but with their entire being. Because in your words, they don't just hear your message, they hear their own calling. You're not persuading them for a yes. You're awakening what has been sleeping inside them. You're not manipulating, you're illuminating, you're not shouting, you're stirring. That is real power. Power that doesn't come from force, but from honesty, integrity, and the unshakable alignment of your soul. Power that doesn't come from making people believe in you, but from helping them believe again in themselves. And if there is one truth I want you to carve into your spirit, it is this. Persuasion does not begin with others. It begins with you. You are the message. You are the mirror. You are the gateway others will walk through to find the greatest version of themselves. And only when you live that truth, only when you commit to being a fire not to burn, but to ignite, you will not only persuade, you will transform the world.